In the city of Furchester, the river drifts lazily beside busy markets, while the sound of a brass band echoes through the town square every Friday. To outsiders, it looks peaceful, but the people who live here know that every street tells a different story. Politics isn't something people only hear on the radio. It's the potholes that never get fixed and the promises that never seem to arrive.
One young journalist decided she would stop listening to promises and start searching for the truth.
So what about the roads and schools? Any progress? We hear the promises, but the roads are still bad.
This is the story of Furchester, a city where every question has the power to change tomorrow.
Ngozi Nwafor was a young journalist with a notepad that was always half full of questions.
This is our freshest batch, straight from the farm this morning. I can give you a very good price if you take more.
But her eyes did.
They were the eyes of someone who believed that every untold story deserved to be heard.
I've seen this city grow from a village.
Business is good, but prices are rising.
The traffic is bad, but we manage.
She believed that one story could change a street, or at least change the way a street was treated by those who held the coins in their pockets. Ngozi's assignment wasn't to recount victories. It was to uncover the truth hidden beneath the dust of political slogans.
Fresh mangoes here! Come and get them!
Her first stop was the river market, where the heartbeat of Furchester could...
That water project, more legend than reality!
For years, leaders had promised pipelines that would bring clean water to the community. But the promises never flowed. In one neighborhood, children grew up splashing through muddy water instead of enjoying the clean water they had been promised.
As laughter faded back into music, Ngozi realized that behind
Ngozi's assignment wasn't to celebrate victories. It was to search for the bones of truth buried beneath the dust of political slogans.
Her first stop was the edge of the river market, where the city's loudest stories were often told between ordinary conversations.
And the water project became a legend! Why did the water project become a legend? Because it had such deep roots!
It was the story of pipelines that were supposed to bring clean water to the community, a promise repeated so many times it began to sound like a myth.
For Ngozi, the joke wasn't just a joke. It was the first clue in a much bigger story, one that the people of Furchester
Believe in the promise. But we're tired of the delivery man who never comes. The next morning, Ngozi made her way to the old council chamber, where the city's biggest decisions were meant to be made. The building wore its years with quiet dignity. From its balcony, citizens could voice their frustrations or applaud speeches filled with promises of better governance.
Governor Ayodele Adekunle addressed the chamber with the confidence of a captain steering a ship through rough waters.
Thank you. We will navigate these challenges with resolve and unity.
He spoke of rising prices, growing lines of job seekers, and schools that existed more in speeches than in bricks. As the applause echoed through the chamber, Ngozi wasn't listening for applause. She was listening for the difference between promises and proof.
I believe.
Across the aisle sat the assembly's lead speaker, a woman whose words could change the mood of an entire room. Her name was Ijeoma Bello, quick-witted, composed, and known for asking the kind of questions that made even confident politicians pause. With a single pointed question, she could turn a room full of doubtful adults into a chorus of thoughtful nods.
Your plan ignores the facts!
No, it protects our future!
Empty promises! Where's the funding?
We will find it. Trust the process.
Ngozi began to notice a pattern that had become all too familiar in Furchester. Promises traveled through the city the way gossip did.
They moved quickly from podiums to radio stations, from newspapers to market conversations, leaving behind trails of half-truths that were often easier to repeat than to verify. Across the aisle sat the assembly's lead speaker, a sharp-minded woman named Ijeoma Bello.
Thank you. With a single well-placed question, she could turn a room full of skeptics into a chorus of thoughtful nods.
She didn't need to raise her voice. Her questions spoke louder than applause.
We must act now to secure our future.
But how will you fund these promises?
Through reallocation and new partnerships.
We need details, not just words.
From her seat, Ngozi noticed a pattern that had become all too familiar in Furchester.
Promises traveled through the city like gossip, passed from one person to another, leaving behind a trail of half-truths, unanswered questions, and fading hope. After the meeting, Ngozi wasn't looking for another speech. She was looking for answers. There, she met an unexpected ally, a retired engineer named Mr. Chidi Okoye.
His blueprints were exact. His notes were precise. But it was the caution in his voice that made Ngozi lean in. Budget lines don't lie. But politicians do when the numbers don't fit the story they want to tell.
The truth is in the gaps between what leaders promise and what gets built, between what's allocated and what's actually spent.
And sometimes, the biggest gap of all is the one between the last audit and the next.
Over the following days, Ngozi and Mr. Okoye began mapping the gaps, one community, one project, and one conversation at a time.
Denise, let's prioritize this area.
Their first stop was a school where children learned with determination, despite the lack of proper bathrooms.
Next came a market where poor drainage turned every rainfall into another challenge for hard-working traders.
At a rural health clinic, an aging generator struggled to stay alive, as if it only worked when the wind decided to help.
Years of bargaining have taught us the real value isn't the goods. I see, it's about the future. Exactly. We bargain for hope, for our children. That is our true profit.
They formed their own oversight group, reviewing documents on a corkboard, proving that accountability begins in the marketplace.
Look at this budget. The numbers don't add up. We must document it. The people's eyes got tired of watching the same theater.
So we started counting the days a project was promised and the days it finally arrived.
We must review these figures carefully.
Yes, but what about the timeline? And the resources for the next phase? We need to be started asking questions.
Slowly at first.
The deeper Ngozi searched, the clearer one truth became.
In Furchester, giving was not the same as delivering. A vote alone could not turn a bill into a bridge.
An election was never a certificate of competence. It was a moment when the people asked their leaders to prove they were truly listening.
One evening, Ngozi and a handful of community members gathered at a small radio station, Radio Furchester. The room carried the scent of coffee and old paper, while the microphone stood like a quiet judge, waiting for someone to speak truth to power.
The moment the broadcast began, voices from across the city started pouring in.
A young mother spoke about a street that flooded every rainy season, where poor drainage turned every storm into a familiar disaster.
Then a former teacher reminded the city that schools are more than buildings filled with desks, they are promises made to every child's future.
That night, Furchester wasn't divided by neighborhoods or politics. It was united by ordinary voices, each carrying a story that could no longer be ignored.
Ngozi opened her notebook and began to read.
The stars were bright that night.
But it wasn't her words that carried the greatest weight. It was the questions. What will you do when you have to choose between building roads and paying teachers?
How will you make sure that money meant for mothers and newborns reaches the clinics instead of disappearing into the wrong hands?
Who holds the ledger accountable when budgets are shuffled like a deck of cards?
That night, Furchester wasn't searching for easy answers. It was asking the questions that every city must eventually face. By the third week, something had begun to change in Furchester. Like the river itself, the city's current now carried both conversation and change.
This new initiative could really help.
Look, it's trending everywhere. Finally, they're listening to us.
The governor announced a new public accountability initiative, a plan to publish quarterly audits and formally involve citizens in monitoring public projects.
For the first time, community oversight was no longer just a grassroots effort. It had a seat at the table.
This map highlights the key areas we need to focus on.
Agreed. Let's cross-reference it with the compliance report. The opposition answered with a proposal of their own, promising to reduce the time between project approval and actual construction.
Our proposal will cut red tape and speed up projects.
Whether these promises would become reality remained uncertain. But for the first time in a long while, Furchester wasn't just talking about tomorrow, it was taking its first steps toward it.
Ngozi watched as Furchester began to test itself. The real measure of change would no longer be promises, but action. Near the market, the Farmers Cooperative launched a pilot drainage project, small in size, but big in purpose.
Mr. Chidi Okoye supervised every detail, believing that even the smallest improvement could become the foundation for something greater.
Check this measurement again. Good. Keep it steady.
For the first time, people weren't just hearing about progress. They were beginning to see it.
Across town, youth groups organized a walk for honest plans, not to block the streets, but to remind leaders that real progress moves with purpose.
Step by step, project by project, question by question, Furchester was discovering that lasting change is built through steady action, not loud promises.
In the end, the story of Furchester was never about one person's victory or one scandal's defeat.
It was the story of a city learning to hold itself to the light.
Real change came slowly, through the patient work of turning uncertain promises into visible results.
Its greatest strength was never found in political speeches. It lived in ordinary people who chose not to look away. Day after day, they demanded accountability, even when disappointment tempted them to stop believing. Because every better city begins with people who refuse to surrender hope. And in Furchester, every question asked became another step toward a future worth building.